Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. This is a podcast dedicated to educating and empowering women from preconception, pregnancy, birth, and through early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and I'm a maternity pediatric chiropractor, functional medicine practitioner, and mother who has hand-selected experts in natural holistic healthcare specialties to shine light on options and choices during this exciting phase of a woman's life. Today's episode is about creating your personalized birth plan, and my special guest is Dr. ELLIOT Berlin. Dr. Berlin is an award-winning prenatal chiropractor, childbirth educator, labor support bodyworker, filmmaker, and co-founder of the Berlin Wellness Group in Los Angeles, California. And he's also the host of the Informed Pregnancy podcast. Dr. Berlin graduated Summa Cum Laude from Life University of Chiropractic in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Atlanta School of Massage. Dr. Berlin's Informed Pregnancy Project aims to utilize multiple forms of media, including podcasts, YouTube series, documentaries, and online workshops to compile and deliver unbiased information about pregnancy and childbirth to empower new and expectant parents to make informed choices regarding their pregnancy and parenting journey. Dr. Berlin lives in Los Angeles with his wife, perinatal psychologist Dr. Alyssa Berlin, and their 4 fantastic kids. Hi, Dr. Berlin. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Thank you for having me back.
Yes, round 2. We had such a great conversation the first time around that I was really thrilled when you reached out to come back on and inform the audience about updates to your streaming service, Informed Pregnancy Plus, and some of the newest guidelines that are out there that women need to know about.
Thank you. You know, chiropractors always say we're glad to see her back.
That's right. So today's topic, we're going to focus around a woman who is creating her personalized birth plan. And so in order to really make that custom to a woman's wants, desires, and needs, there's a lot of research and education that needs to go into that. And it's a lot more than what you're going to get at a typical, let's say, birth prep class, right? So especially if it's offered at a hospital. So, I'm really excited for you to share with the audience today about different choices and options a woman has going into the birth process.
Yeah, just like you, I'm sure we see so many people who set up a vision for birth, which is already, I think, a positive step, because there's probably a larger pool of people that don't really think about it and just go with the flow. Mm-hmm. And neither one is necessarily wrong, but in today's environment, there's a lot to know, so if you're just giving birth, 150 years ago, if you can clear a path for that inner voice, which knows exactly what to do, to be able to hear that inner voice and just follow its instructions, then you'd have the greatest birth ever that you could, because it's being directed by a wisdom much greater than our educated intelligence. But today there's a lot of choices to make, and starting with where are you going to have your baby? What setting? Are you going to be at home, at a birth center, at a hospital? And then within those choices, like which birth center, which hospital, and who's going to surround you in your birth? Who's going to support you? Is it going to be nobody? Is it going to be a midwife? And there's multiple types of midwife. Is it going to be a medical practitioner? And there are multiple types of medical practitioner. And each one of those choices that you make has sort of consequences, right? There's going to be things that happen at your birth because of those choices. So those are kind of important things, but we've all seen people make these choices and it doesn't go how they envisioned. Sometimes the best is when it goes greater than their wildest dreams. But oftentimes it does not go as well as they had hoped, or it goes in a different direction than they had hoped. And if they haven't thought it out and they're not ready for it, sometimes those twists and turns take you by surprise and you end up not really having the information you need to make a decision in the moment. So I think the birth plan and birth intentions is sort of thinking that through before you get there. Like, if this were to happen, what would I want to do?
It's really hard to learn when you're in labor. Your mind is not in a place that it can start processing logical facts and data, right? It's often a different dimension. So what you're saying is during the pregnancy, before labor begins, you are aware of all these different options and choices. And even if it's not necessarily your first choice, if that's the path that you're on, you know how to respond to it.
Exactly. I always encourage my patients to look at the birth plan as a flow chart. And on page 1 of the flow chart, you put the most natural birth that you're interested in exploring. And that's really different from person to person. Like one person may just want to squat in a strawberry field with nobody around her, and somebody else might want an elective cesarean at a certain date. And I support them all. It's your informed choice to make. My job is to make sure it's an informed choice, to give you as much of the pros and cons and data that we know about so that you can make that choice from a place of empowerment and knowledge. And then once you make page 1, the most natural birth you could kind of see yourself exploring, it's just page 1, and the journey, once it begins, may go exactly that way, or there may be detours along the way. So for me, living here in California, I like to think if I'm going to drive from Los Angeles all the way up north to San Francisco, there are a million different routes I could take. And if I don't think about it, if I just put it into the system, it'll take me on a route. My GPS will get me there. But I may care how I get there. I may want to, for that long drive, have a more scenic route, even if it takes a little more time. Or I may be in a rush and want the fastest route, even if it's dull and boring. So if I look at the map, I can sort of say, oh, all things being equal, I'd like to go this way, and then make that my page 1. But in reality, if I'm driving and I come across a detour, then I will take a different path and I will still get to my destination, and it'll be my second best choice if I've done my homework. And so to a degree, that's what the birth plan is. Sometimes you don't even get out of a gate. You have a low-lying placenta, or you'll have a breech baby, and in your area there's no options. And page 1 is we're off of page 1 before you even get started. Other times you are out of the gate, but something will happen. Things will take longer, or there'll be something that comes up in labor that you'll have to make a decision about. You have your flow chart. If this happens, I'd like to go in that direction. If this happens, I'd like to go in the other direction. And at the end of that flow chart, generally speaking, in every single birth plan is a cesarean birth, because if you want one or if you need one, then you're going to have one. And in this case, if you've thought it through, even for the cesarean, as long as it's not a code 1 emergency, there are choices to make.
Right.
And why not think those through as well, so that you're still empowered in your cesarean birth? And if it goes that way, if you wanted to squat in a strawberry field and you ended up in a cesarean birth, and you have this style of birth plan, then your plan did not fail. You've just followed your plan all the way through to the last page. And it's a whole different feeling, I think, than only having page 1 and somewhere getting knocked off course and having no backup.
I love this concept, because you're right. I think if a woman doesn't have her page 1 birth plan happen for her, then she equates that to failure, right? And that's really disempowering. So if we can just, like you said, walk all the way through to all of the options, including a cesarean birth, where you can have your baby have a vaginal, swab and other things that possibly could be, skin on skin contact right after the surgical birth. These are options that could happen for a woman, even if she wanted a natural vaginal delivery. And that's still creating an empowerment feeling for her, that I'm having a cesarean. It wasn't my page 1, but I'm still doing it my way, right? I'm having it the way I want to do it. And because I knew about these options before I was in the OR giving birth, right? So this is, I think, really valid. And it's really a psychological, mental situation that you're sharing with us.
Yeah, I think, let's say you don't want to be induced, but for one reason or another, you need to be induced. There's a lot of different ways to be induced, and there are pros and cons to each method. And knowing even just how they're administered and what the potential side effects are, or alternatives are, you can make that birth plan and calmly follow it in the event that you have to be induced. Not, like you said, start researching at that moment. We have a whole episode on induction methods and also indications, like what are the things that really I need to induce for? And same for cesarean. We have a whole episode on the gentle cesarean, which is all about, cesarean birth is still birth. It's the moment in time when a baby comes through your body into the universe. And it's a magical moment for that baby, for you, and for the universe. And in a vaginal birth, that often gets celebrated. And a cesarean birth, that often gets lost. But it doesn't have to if you plan ahead. You're right, there are medical choices like the ones you mentioned. And also, do I want my limbs strapped down or not? Some places that's standard, but you can opt out of it if you know that.
Advocate for yourself. Yeah.
Totally. But you can't advocate if you don't know the choices. And even like just, hi, can we only talk about things pertaining to the birth in this room? For sometimes the technicians, it's a job. So, if there was a big game last night, they may be talking about the scores while they're, prepping you or doing anesthesia or other things like that. And that takes away from your opportunity to make this that magical birth experience. And it can really be. It's birth that's quite beautiful.
You could have relaxing music playing.
Exactly. The ambiance and
the lighting.
A lot of places have the option for you to see what's happening with a clear drape if you want to, or to not see what's happening with an opaque drape if you don't want to. So things like that. Is your partner going to be in the room while you're being prepped or not in the room? It's a lot of places standard that they get kicked out, but it's oftentimes when you need your support from your partner. And so you might be able to opt in to have
and possibly a doula. Can a doula be there as well?
Yeah, it just really depends from facility to facility. But that goes back to like which facility are you having your birth at and what are their policies, and choosing a facility that's in line with your policies if you're able to. And, the biggest hospital here, which I can see out my window, is really depends on the anesthesiologist whether or not you can have your doula at the cesarean birth. And so on an unscheduled cesarean, that's not going to be a choice, but you get who you get. But if you're scheduling a cesarean, you might do it at a time when you know that there's an anesthesiologist who's doula friendly if you want to bring your doula to your C-section.
I mean, that is so crazy to me that the anesthesiologist would have that type of power.
Yeah, I can see it for certain reasons, but I don't understand exactly the hierarchy or why it's really a choice. I mean, it seems like if somebody will be a lot more calm with a doula in the room, you probably have better outcomes. I don't have a study to back that up, but it's, again, it's my experience. Unless there's a very strong reason why you wouldn't be able to have a doula. Some of those operating theaters are very small. And so there's not maybe room for an extra person. You get to pick one person to bring with you and not two. But maybe there's a valid reason. But in the absence of a strong reason, it seems like you should be able to have two support people with you.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You had hinted a little bit about potential vaginal breech options for women. Do you want to dive a little bit more into that?
Yeah, I mean, in most parts of the United States, you're really running low on choices. If the baby's breech, you generally are going to have a recommendation for a scheduled cesarean at 39 weeks. And I was born in 1974 breech. I don't think they even knew I was breech. I came out breech and like, oh, okay. It just was a standard thing that nobody cared about. However, as cesarean birth became a safer and safer option, we started to ask the question, who would actually be better off having a cesarean birth versus a vaginal birth? At the beginning of C-sections, they weren't all that good. At the very beginning, we couldn't necessarily guarantee that we'd save both the mother and baby. So we only did them under the most dire of emergencies when we're at risk of losing both. Then, we could do them, but the risk of infection was very high. Initially, it was sort of a radical cesarean where we also lost the uterus.
Oh, wow.
And so there wasn't an option that people turned to unless it was a very, very critical reason for doing it. Flash forward 2025, things have gotten way better. Our techniques and innovations in medicine and surgery and infection control, in suturing and incision making have all really improved a lot. It's a very simple procedure to do. It's reliably safe to do. Like anything else, it has risks. But the question is constantly coming up, are the risks of a vaginal birth higher or lower than a cesarean birth now that it's super safe for different categories of people? So I mentioned earlier, low-lying placenta. If your placenta is completely blocking your cervix, I'm pretty sure everyone would agree, better off to have a C-section than have the baby smash through your placenta to come out. And so we just constantly are applying that question to different categories of people. Maybe if there's an active STD lesion, are we better off not having the baby move through the birth canal and be exposed, for example? So in the late 90s, a study was done in McGill University in Canada, and the question was posed to breech babies. We know that when breech babies are born vaginally, there's a couple of complications that could happen that don't happen with head-down babies and that don't happen with cesarean birth. The two main ones are that the whole baby comes out and the head gets stuck, head entrapment, and the baby's trying to start breathing, the lungs are inflating, but they're sort of in an aqueous solution, and it's a real emergency there. Or B, if the umbilical cord comes through the cervix from the womb to the birth canal first, and then the baby comes through and compresses their own cord before they come out. Also, umbilical cord prolapse, another potentially very significant emergency. So it was a reasonable question. Hey, we can avoid that maybe if we just do cesarean birth, and babies will not have those two risks. So they essentially, I'm simplifying the study, but they took about 2,000 women who had breech babies and randomly, with their permission, assigned them to a vaginal birth or a cesarean birth, or at least that's what they were going to go for. Some of the people that were meant to have a vaginal birth ended up in a cesarean birth anyway, and vice versa. If somebody went into labor before their scheduled cesarean date and things moved quickly, they could have also had their baby vaginally instead, even though they were signed cesarean. They looked at the outcomes after birth, and the conclusion was there's a small but statistically significant better outcome for breech babies when they're born by cesarean than when they're born vaginally. So question was, are we better off doing breech babies by cesarean? Answer, yes, by a little bit. And with that, overnight, the United States and Canada pretty much made the recommendation that all breech babies should be born by planned cesarean. And so the option, it's just a recommendation, not a law, but the option for breech birth started to disappear almost overnight. And there's a lot of trouble with that. First of all, it's a single study. Second of all, it was a small but statistically significant finding. Third, the study was done in I think 24 countries and in a bunch of birth settings, some of which had no advanced imaging, some of which had practitioners that were not well skilled at breech delivery, some of which that had no NICU to take care of breech babies if they needed support after they came out. Very little selection was done, and that's really important because some breech babies are much better poised for an uncomplicated delivery, and other ones aren't. So if the two risks that we have are the head entrapment and the umbilical cord prolapse, well, if you already had two babies come through without getting stuck, the odds of the third one, even if it's breech, coming through and getting stuck are extremely low. That's a different than somebody who's never had a baby. Obviously, smaller babies versus bigger babies, babies with their head in certain flexion positions that can get stuck versus not being in that kind of position. So very little selection was done. So how do you extrapolate that for a baby who's a good candidate? In a facility where a practitioner has a lot of experience and training and skill and confidence and a NICU in case you need it, you can't. So for the option to disappear like that was a bad thing. An important option was taken off the table for a lot of people. A 2-year follow-up study found no long-term difference in health in the babies that made it through the birth 2 years earlier. So it didn't matter if they were born by cesarean or vaginal. There was no long-term difference in health. I don't think there was no follow-up study on the moms.
Yeah, I was going to say, what about the moms?
Yeah, that follow-up study wasn't done. The original study found no significant difference, I believe, in the immediate health of the mother after birth. It was the babies where they found that small but statistically significant finding. And there's no follow-up study on future pregnancies after that initial cesarean, which is a key point too, because once you have a C-section, your next pregnancy, the pregnancy itself is open to additional complications like the placenta embedding itself where there's a scar and creating placenta accreta, which could be a significant complication. It's not a small increase in odds either. And then the birth, you only have two choices. You could either have a vaginal birth after cesarean or a cesarean birth after cesarean, both of which are more prone to complication than a vaginal birth after a vaginal birth. So there's no follow-up study on that either to show, okay, maybe there's a small but statistically significant better outcome for that baby born by cesarean rather than vaginally. But what about the next baby? Is a significantly greater increase for the pregnancy or birth now that you've done a C-section. So basically, 4 years after the study came out, a researcher named Glazerman tore apart the study for many of the reasons that I'm mentioning and recommended that the conclusion of the term breech trial be rescinded. And then the United States and Canada both changed their policies, their recommendations, and still to this day, the recommendation from ACOG, I think the latest update was in 2024, indicate that a vaginal breech birth is a valid option, a reasonable option, if you meet certain criteria and if you can find a practitioner who's still skilled at it. And
right. That's the hardest part now, right?
Well, once we stop doing it, how could anybody get the training? Even an intellectually curious young resident who wants to be able to offer it needs to have a lot of exposure to it and training in it to be able to become confident and skilled at it. And there's just not enough volume anywhere in the United States that I know of for someone to really get great training and get confident in it. So here it's a dying art. There are certain places around the world where they're still teaching and preserving it. In California, we had the worst scenario, which is midwives were pretty good at it and confident with it, but they took it out of the scope of practice of midwifery.
Wow.
They're not allowed to do it, and doctors who are allowed to do it don't want to or don't feel confident. And so the choice, as the older doctors who never stop doing it start to retire and pass, the options becoming more and more limited.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue in my area. There's one doctor I know of who serves a large Hasidic Jewish population, and they're, very interested in having vaginal delivery when possible. And so it's an option, and he's trained, another doctor under him to also offer it. But, if you're not in that practice, it's, once you're third trimester, it's hard to even switch to a practitioner who does offer it. Some practices won't allow a transfer at that point in the pregnancy.
We're still lucky here. We have one doctor, he's not super close to here, who is an older guy, and he does take transfers at 36, 37 weeks for breech.
Okay.
Pretty common for them. But I think he's in two different hospitals. One allows it and one doesn't allow it. So it sort of depends where he's on call when you go into labor, which is not a very comforting feeling. We have another younger doctor who does it, but only if you're in the practice, like you were saying. And another younger doctor who does it, but he's just switched hospitals. And so the new hospital doesn't have protocols for breech birth yet. And he's writing protocols, but by the time he writes them and submits them and gets them approved, if they get approved, could be quite some time. So the options are pretty slim here. We did make a documentary about it. It's called Heads Up, The Disappearing Art of Vaginal Breech Delivery. And it's intentionally short, 34 minutes, and it's loaded with information and visuals. You get to see what it looks like when a breech baby comes through just naturally. And I think a lot of people are surprised that it just looks like a birth. It's
not a big deal.
It's cute when the baby backs out of the mom, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, Dr. Berlin, you just mentioned something else that was like an aha moment for me is you could have a woman who's like, I want this vaginal breech delivery, because obviously the woman also has to want that option, right? If she's afraid of it, if it doesn't feel safe for her, then choosing a cesarean birth would be a better option for her, right? But if she wants it, she has a practitioner who offers it, but now the setting, the hospital doesn't allow it. I mean, and I'm assuming that's a malpractice insurance situation.
Right. It's generally a liability that they're worried about.
But some hospitals do offer it. So obviously it's not across the board. So that's fascinating. Like that is something like, how would a woman even know what these hospital guidelines are around birth? Like, I mean, is that published on their website? Like, how would somebody even know that type of information?
I find the best intel on those things is calling the nurses at labor and delivery and asking them what the hospital policy is. And hospital policies change all the time, too. They're worried about liability. And even though it's within the ACOG guidelines still,
to
do a breech birth, it is not the community norm and has not been the community norm for a long time because that study came out in 2001. And so when you go against the community norm, you do something that's not the community norm, the liability is much, much higher. Liability being risk to them, not risk to you. Medical risk doesn't change because liability changes. So vaginal breech birth is not without risk. Neither is cesarean birth. Neither is even a head-down vaginal birth. They all have risk, and it's important to learn the types of risk and the occurrence of those risks and the ways to mitigate those risks, and then make your choice. That's what I mean by making an informed choice. But liability is different because it's not the community norm. If the doctor attends a vaginal breech birth, or the facility allows a vaginal breech birth, and then anything doesn't go according to plan, their risk, if you sue, is so high because it's just indefensible because it's not a community norm, even though it's within the guidelines.
And that's so shocking to me. Like if it was not part of the guidelines, like you mentioned with ACOG, then I could certainly understand hesitancy, right? Or why like it just wouldn't be allowed because malpractice carrier wouldn't provide coverage, right? But that's so fascinating that the community norm really drives the boat here.
Yeah, you go against the community norm. It's a lawyer comes in and just drives home, especially in a jury trial where there's a baby involved. This is not the community norm. Almost no doctors do this, and this is why. And you shouldn't have done this, and because you did this, we have this problem, and you need to pay big time. And so, no practitioner wants to be on the receiving end of that. No institution wants to be on the receiving end of that. And because of that litigiousness, the choice is really, cut off further than it should be, and that it would be. And I also think what you said is really important. Not everybody wants the option for a vaginal birth, or at least doesn't want to exercise that option with a breech baby or any baby.
Yeah.
And I'm just as big an advocate for you to be able to say, even with your head down, perfectly poised for a great birth, vaginal birth baby, if you'd rather have a cesarean birth for any reason at all, that's your choice, and I support you there too. And would encourage a practitioner, and I have encouraged practitioners who sort of want to take away that option, to say, wait a second, step back and think about it. It's not our choice. This is hard for me to learn as a practitioner also, by the way. 20 years in, I've come a long way, and I still, it's hard for me sometimes when I have a patient and there's options and I know which option is clear in my mind, the better option. We should do this or we should not do this. And I give that counsel to my patient and they go the other way. And it's not because I'm so high on myself. It's because if you were me or my beloved family member, I would strongly encourage you not to do that option based on everything I know, based on everything I've taught and seen over the years of practice. But it's not my choice. And so all I could do is deliver an informed choice, and you make the choice, and I support the choice that you make. It's hard. I don't think there's malintent from any of these doctors or practitioners or even the facility. They're not looking to take away your choice. They'd rather you have the option, I think, as a human. But with all the factors at play, they feel, handcuffed, and therefore they err on the side of what's safer for them.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Are there any new updates that you wanted to share around informed choice for women listening?
Well, I think that the guidelines on VBAC have become a lot looser in the past few years. There's a symposium in 2010. They really took a very thorough look at vaginal birth after cesarean, and the conclusion, they had researchers from many different backgrounds, carefully vetted to not have ulterior motives, and it was a great symposium. And the conclusion was that vaginal birth is generally a safe option. It's the risks that are involved, like anything else that has risk, are well within the normal obstetric risks that we take with other decisions. And it should be, again, more of a patient choice with counsel, but a patient choice. And there are too many obstacles in the way of patients having access to vaginal birth after cesarean, and they made recommendations on how to remove those obstacles. And some of them have been removed. And I certainly see here in Los Angeles more and more facilities getting on board with vaginal birth after cesarean, and the choice is becoming more available, and more people, I wouldn't say in droves, but more people are exploring that option and going down that path, and for the most part having great success with it. I would say that from our patients who attempt a VBAC, about 85% are successful. So it's nice to see that unfolding.
I see, the women coming for chiropractic care in the pregnancy who are wanting a VBAC delivery with their follow-up pregnancy. I think that there's that, number one, that commitment in that woman's mind of really creating a different birth experience than the one she had previously, and is doing a lot of things to support a successful VBAC, right? Because it does require preparation. She's getting her pelvis aligned with chiropractic adjustments. She's, maybe doing some hypnotherapy and acupuncture and all the things that are going to support her, and having a doula support her in having that successful VBAC, along with a practitioner who has a good record with VBAC, right? So when you put that all together, we do tend to see that happen, with actually really beautiful births are occurring with VBACs.
Yeah, it's really nice to watch. And this goes back to page 1 of the birth plan, where are you going to have your baby and with what type of practitioner and which one. I find practitioners that are totally opposed to VBAC, they just don't want to get involved.
Yeah, that's not going to be the person you choose.
That's not your choice unless you absolutely have to. And then there's also a difference, I think, a nuance between VBAC tolerant and VBAC supportive. And if you really want that VBAC, you're better off going with somebody who's VBAC supportive and has a good history with it. And because there are choices to make along the way, and there are lines in the sand, like, let's say some doctors will have a cutoff on perceived birth weight. If your baby's measuring over 8 pounds, I'm not going to do that. So, okay, first of all, how do you know there's no baby scale? And second of all, that seems like a little arbitrary, And also what you said about aligning the pelvis is really important. We have a film called Trial of Labor, which is all about vaginal birth after cesarean, a beautiful film that I'm really proud of. And one of the moms in that story had a baby that was 10.3 pounds and got stuck and wouldn't come out. And they told her it's because your pelvis is too small. That's a big baby and small pelvis. Obviously, that's why it couldn't come out. She was on the VBAC journey. I don't want to give away too many endings, but I will say she did have a VBAC, and the baby came so fast, the doctor almost missed it. And that baby was 10.6.
And she got adjusted with his second pregnancy, not the first.
Yes. And in the first pregnancy, her pelvis was a combination. She's fit, so strong, but also tight, which makes rigid. And, if the baby's perfectly lined up with the runway, you probably have a better shot. But if the baby needs to maneuver at all, that rigid, inflexible pelvis makes a big difference. So the adjustments go a long way. Massage adjustments, anything you can do to restore normal function, normal tone in the soft tissues and the bones of the pelvis make a very big difference.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And I know you and I see that on a regular basis in our practice, serving pregnant women with chiropractic adjustments. And it's really one of the most amazing things you can do during your pregnancy. And sadly, sometimes I don't see women until their second pregnancy because they didn't know it was an option during their first. They might have suffered with back pain or had, an emergency C-section and things like that they're really looking to change. They want to feel good during their pregnancy. They don't want to suffer with all these common pregnancy symptoms, and they want to, create that page 1 birth.
Now, it's hard for us to watch that, and equally hard with the media, where I have a much larger audience, national and international. My least favorite feedback is, gosh, I wish I would have seen your film Trial of Labor before I had my baby.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I made it for you to see it before you have your baby. All these films and all the web series and all the instructional content that we put together is there to help empower you. In fact, a subtitle for Trial of Labor might be how to have your second birth the first time around.
Right. I know you and I both really share that passion of getting this information to women, first time pregnant moms, right? Because a lot of it's just like really, I can't tell you how many times I've heard it in my practice, and you as well, I'm sure, where these women are like, I really did not know what I was getting into until after the fact. And like that hindsight is 2020. And they're like, I want a really very different experience with my birth, with my postpartum recovery, all of the things that go through pregnancy and birth and a recovery at the end of the 4th trimester.
Absolutely. I'll just say we have a brand new podcast that just came out. It is called One Way or a Mother. And it's pretty exciting. It's feedback that we got on. We do a lot of before and after birth stories where we'll interview somebody while she is pregnant about the pregnancy and about the birth she's planning to have, and then afterwards about how the birth went down. And the net result is you learn a lot from her, things that she could have only learned by going through it, and then shares those nuggets. And they're pretty valuable pearls for people to kind of take in as they're planning their own flow chart. And we got feedback. People love those episodes in general, the celebrity ones even more, but they wanted to be taken deeper in, especially with an intricate birth story, sometimes a 40-hour labor that we tell over in 40 minutes. And it's only 1 minute per hour of labor. So we took that feedback and we took a pretty intricate birth story. It's a pretty common story, unfortunately, where somebody was planning a home birth and didn't have a flow chart and ended up having a cesarean birth that she wasn't prepared for, and it left her feeling traumatized in at least in her body, in her mind, and even in her spirit. And we catch up with her pregnant with her second baby and just really explore what happened last time and how she can have a more empowered birth this time. And it's deep. We talk to her husband. We talk to her midwife and doula from the first birth, her obstetrician from the upcoming birth, her Reiki healer, who she affectionately refers to as the witch, her mom. We process some of the ancestral things that she holds on to.
Wow.
And it's a really deep, beautiful story. I'm really pleased with the way it came out. She's really pleased with the way it came out. And that's just season 1. So the entire season is 10 episodes that are built on top of each other, taking you in real time through her story. And it's just launching now on all the different podcast players, One Way or a Mother.
Oh, it's on One Way or Mother.
We've already recorded seasons 2 and season 3, and they get even juicier, I would say. Really interesting stories that you don't hear every day, really from perspectives, almost like how they show football games now, like almost there's cameras on the helmets and you're in the action. We've listened to the feedback and we've worked really hard to take people into these stories and to really get some informational and entertaining at the same time experiences with them. Just stay tuned. There's a lot of great stuff coming with One Way or a Mother.
Sounds like a reality TV show.
A little bit, but more tastefully done.
Right. Oh my God, that's awesome. So I can't wait to check out your podcast, The One Way or a Mother. I didn't know about that. So that's going to be fun. And then I want to wrap up with you telling the audience about Informed Pregnancy Plus and how they can access it and what they're going to get out of it.
Yeah, with Informed Pregnancy Plus, it really started because I have those 2 documentaries I mentioned, Heads Up and Trial of Labor. They came out with a bang. People were really excited about them. There were screenings. There were all sorts of Q&As, and it was having the intended result. And I would say after about 6 months to a year, they just kind of, like the match died out. And I reached out to other filmmakers in the space. I'm like, how do you get your films to still meet their potential and help people after that initial phase? And they said, that's something we all struggle with. So I had the idea to put them all together, as many of them as I can. We're still constantly adding new ones, but we've a few dozen of the best documentaries. We have your story on there, which is awesome. And we have, on top of just documentaries, we have web series. We're constantly making new ones. We have a brand new one that's in production now called The Fourth Try, all about and planning for postpartum and how you can do things for a smoother mental, physical, and spiritual transition to postpartum. We have workshops on there for all stages of fertility, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, early parenting. There's mind and body stuff on there for better sleep, yoga, physical fitness during and after pregnancy. There's just tons of content. And the idea was to make it accessible to almost everybody, ideally everybody, but in reality, almost everybody. So anybody who has an internet connection can stream right off the website, informedpregnancy.tv. And Informed Pregnancy Plus also has apps for Apple, Android, Roku, Apple TV. Any place you stream your content, Informed Pregnancy is there. We priced it pretty inexpensively. We're going for a balance here. It's anyone can try it free. Your listeners can try it free right now for 30 days with a special code for you guys, WAM30, WAM30, Well-Adjusted Mama. And even then after that, it's around $7 a month, something like 20 cents a day for access to a lot of content. It's a difficult balance because we want to take away all the barriers to people becoming informed and having access to all this content, but then also want to be able to compensate the creators so that they're compensated for work that they're doing and also are able to continue doing work and coming out with new updated content. But all of it is accessible at informedpregnancy.tv.
It is such an awesome resource. Would a woman who is thinking about getting pregnant benefit from starting to watch this information? Is there stuff about fertility, preconception?
There is stuff on fertility and preconception, how to roll out the red carpet for, the baby that will be. But also, it's really anybody who cares about pregnancy, whether you're going to have a baby down the road. I have people that start watching years before they get pregnant. And consuming it slowly in a relaxed way. There's stuff on relationships in there, like the afterbirth plan with my wife, who's a psychologist, a perinatal psychologist. And even if you've already had all your babies, if you know people who are going to have babies, I have grandparents-to-be who are watching it. And the more that people watch it and become informed and talk about it and share it, the more choice becomes restored and the more you become aware of your options and have a more empowered experience. Again, it's different than 150 years ago. There are a lot of choices to make now. And if you don't, which is a choice, but if you don't get informed, you're just basically telling ways to take you from point A to point B, however it sees fit. And you kind of get sucked up in the system. And the problem with that is I think for many people, they look back afterwards and only then realize they had choices and wish they would have known and made different choices and had different outcomes.
Right. Well said. Well, Dr. Berlin, this was an amazing conversation. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me back and for all the incredible work that you do.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It was such a pleasure to have Dr. Berlin on the show for the second time. Him and I share a very similar passion to empowering women during that perinatal phase of their life. And I'm so honored that my birth documentary is also featured on his Informed Pregnancy project. So if you want to check out all of these amazing resources that Dr. Berlin has put together at informedpregnancy.tv, you can sign up for a free 30-day trial with the code WAM30, and it allows you access to all of these amazing resources, including podcasts, YouTube series, documentaries, and online workshops. So don't forget to check it out at informedpregnancy.tv, code WAM30.